And a special edition of Football 24/7 with John McMullen. Eagles postgame as we come to you. Johnny Mac, welcome in. We'll do 15 minutes tonight, Johnny Mac, of the best and worst of what we just watched. Eagles and Seattle, they end up losing the football game 23-17. Let's begin with your first impressions, Johnny Mac, about the game tonight.
Well, I think the offense kind of let the defense down. I thought the defense battled and played well enough to win. You look at DK Metcalf, obviously he was the big issue. Eagles couldn't stop him. But overall, I thought it was sort of a workmanlike performance on the defensive side of the ball. The offense, hey, you take out that last drive, Krause. You mentioned the final score. It wasn't really that close. You get the Hail Mary at the end, and the offense just didn't carry their water.
Johnny, talk about the first half, if you will, a little bit. The play of Carson Wentz, all of the eyeballs were on Carson Wentz coming into the football game. He ended up 25 out of 45, 215 yards, couple of touchdowns, a pick. He got that last touchdown that spoiled a lot of money for the 91% of the bettors in America that bet on Seattle. But other than that, your assessment of how Carson played tonight?
Yeah, it wasn't good. I mean, the same things, the same teams we've been talking about all season. For whatever reason, the confidence is gone. You saw the 10th different offensive line in 11 games, 6 sacks. You saw the accuracy was missing, off again. The receivers weren't getting separation, so that doesn't help. You can see it's just not there. You think about the 4th and 4 play, Krause, which to me was the turning point of the game. Eagles down 2 scores. They could have kicked the field goal. Drew within 8 points with about 8.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. But they decided to go for it right there. Dallas Goedert, who had a decent game, and that was the one guy that Carson had some chemistry with. But sure enough, they weren't on the same page. Dallas Goedert goes inside. Carson Wentz throws it outside. Interception. Essentially, the game is over. I don't think you think about the drama leading up to this game and all the talk about will Jalen Hurts make more of an impact? Will he play more? He didn't, but I don't think those instances where they bring Hurts into the game, I don't think it helps either. I don't think, obviously, it doesn't help Carson in any momentum he's trying to get. I don't think it helps Jalen Hurts either. You got to pick one or the other. I wouldn't argue with anyone, Joe, that if they wanted to bench Carson Wentz, he's playing that poorly. But then you got to give the reins to Jalen Hurts. You can't do this back and forth. And Doug Peterson should know that. By the way, I think he does. He's a former quarterback in this league. He understands that. This is getting pushed from up above and Jeffrey Lurie, and it's a bad situation.
Johnny Mac, 46 sacks now. Carson's been sacked 46 times after, I think it's 46, after,
46.
After the game tonight. Certainly, by far, leads the NFL in that category, which then, as it trickles down, leads to a higher number of interceptions. He has 15 of those, leads the NFL. He's not Superman. This isn't 2017. This is an offensive line in front of him that's broken down, and I just don't know what you can ask him to do. I know that many people are going to say I'm apologizing for Carson Wentz, but there's only so much one man can do on the field, John.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think this is a good football team, but I think it's fair to say that. I think it's also fair to say that Carson Wentz hasn't handled that adversity as well as he could. You mentioned the interceptions, and I'll throw the fumbles and then the fact that he leads the NFL in turnovers. That's stuff that he can get a little bit better at. Now, it's not necessarily going to turn into winning football games because there is a personnel deficiency on this team that's only been compounded by all the injuries. But there are things he could do better. There were throws, for instance, the rare times the receivers do get separation. It seems, and Alshon Jeffrey got open late in this game in the fourth quarter, and Carson just missed him. And it's a throw that's there that you have to make as an NFL quarterback. So I think it all is married together in the fact that the poor offensive line play, and remember, this is, again, the 10th different group in 11 games that he's played behind. So there's been no continuity on the offensive line. And the receivers aren't playing well. And Miles Sanders is having a bad year as a receiver that even Deuce Bailey acknowledged that he had to tighten up his hands. So you have all these things sort of working in a negative direction. So, but while I say all of that, the quarterback still has control over certain things. And one of them is ball security. One of them is making throws that are there. And I think if I saw more of that, I would have more confidence in Carson Wentz. But I look at a player right now who lacks confidence in himself, to be honest.
It's a special post-game edition of Football 24/7 with Johnny Mack, John McMullen. Of course, later on today, you'll hear Johnny Mack on the middle with Barrett Brooks, Harry Mays, and Eitan Shander. You'll hear him on the Fix with Ryan Rothstein, and you'll hear him on 94.1 WIP with Jody Mack. All of that coming up on this Tuesday. Johnny, talk about that first offensive Eagle touchdown. I don't know how to categorize that drive other than to say it was the most awkward 75-yard touchdown drive that I've ever watched. You've watched a hell of a lot more football than I have, but they somehow went 75 yards and got a touchdown.
Yeah, and at the time, I agree with the crowd. They called it the ugliest drive I've ever seen. It was apropos that Jake Elliott missed the extra point. He's probably sick to his stomach after watching it, but somehow they managed to get over the goal line. And when you're struggling like the Eagles are offensively, I mean, by hook or by crook, if you do it, it's a positive. And that's the way. One of the things, the prior two games, Krause, they were 2 of 21 in third down conversions, and they started this game 0 for 5. So they were 2 for 26 coming into that drive, and they started converting third down. They ended up converting, I think, 3 or 4 on that drive, and overall 5 in a row. Kind of, at least if you want to look for a silver lining, I think that's it. They finally got going a little bit on third down, converting some things in drives. And that's what they were able to do, even though it was dink and dunk. I mean, they just don't have playmakers right now outside the numbers. And you can see it by who Carson trusts. And it's Dallas Goedert, a tight end. It's Richard Rodgers, a tight end. It's Boston Scott out of the backfield. Really, you look at the numbers of Jalen Reagor, it's 7 targets and barely any efficiency. He's running the long route. If you remember that Jamal Adams blitz that ended the Eagles' drive in the third quarter, that was a perfect play call. People talk about play calling, Krause, and they want to criticize the head coach. They had a wide receiver screen set up at the perfect time, and Jalen Reagor didn't know the play and ran a different route, and it blew up the entire play. So these are some of the things in Week 12 that shouldn't be going on. And if you want to criticize the coaching staff, forget about play calling. Criticize the coaching staff because these guys aren't on the same page, and the younger players, like Reagor is a perfect example, aren't prepared, and they should be by this point in the season. Even in this COVID-19 world, where we had a virtual off season. That's all out the window. You see rookies around this league excelling by this point. Things should be going on here, and it's not.
John, I don't know what all of the numbers were for the Eagles receiving core, but at first glance or first memory after watching the game without looking at the stat sheet, I've got to believe that the numbers across the board for the receiving core are horrible.
Yeah, they are. I got them in front of me right here. I just got them. So Rager, I mentioned 3 receptions and 7 targets for 11 yards, Krause. This is supposed to be a speed guy. That's 3.7 yards per catch. Travis Fulgham, who, by the way, didn't play a lot early in this game. They want more to Alshon Jeffrey, kept Greg Ward and Jalen Rager on the field. He caught both of his targets only for 16 yards. Jeffrey caught 2 of 4 for 15 yards. Greg Ward caught 1 of 3 for 3 yards. And John Hightower caught one ball for 1 yard. That's your receiving team. And I got to tell you, fans aren't allowed at Lincoln Financial Field now again. As you know, if you see these games live from up top, you see the lack of separation from these receivers. It puts the quarterback, whoever the quarterback is, Carson Wentz or Jalen Hurts, or even if you wanted to play Nate Sudfeld, these guys aren't getting separation. So it's difficult to get them the football.
Yeah, it's so hard, Johnny Mac, to think that this team can be better than they are, yet for the next 5 days, as a fan base, we will go through every different gyration possible to figure out why they're not being better. I think it simply comes down to they're just not good enough. They're just not talented enough to compete with the best teams in the league. That simple.
Yeah, there's no question. Personnel is number one on any list. There's a lot of issues, but personnel is always number one in any NFL city. If you have a struggling team, and that's the case here. And offensively, it starts with the offensive line, and a lot of it has to do with attrition. I mean, remember, when they started this thing, it was supposed to be Andre Dillard from left to right, Isaac Seumalo, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson. Well, tonight it was Jordan Mailata. Seumalo's back, Kelsey's in there, and it was Jason Peters at right guard and Matt Pryor at right back. And we've seen that, as I mentioned, 10 different iterations in 11 games. You've seen players like Nate Herbig out there, Sua Opeta, Jamon Brown played a game. Jack Driscoll, rookie, has played at times at right tackle. If you look at the good offensive teams in this league, all of them usually have at least a competent offensive line. If you can't block people up front, it's tough to be consistent offensively.
One last thought from John McMullen. This is Football 24/7 with Johnny Mac, special post-game edition. John, there's already Twitter post flying around after the football game tonight that Jim Schwartz injected some additional fuel into DK Metcalf's desire to have a big game by telling him he's not Megatron yet. What do you hear? What do you make of that story?
No, Jim. Remember, he said he's not Calvin Johnson yet. Now, I don't know in this Twitter world. I mean, that's one of the greatest receivers of all time. Megatron, that's a guy who, even though he retired early, is going in the Hall of Fame. It is not a criticism to say somebody's not Calvin Johnson. To even be in that conversation if you know Jim Schwartz at all, it's a compliment. He was actually trying to compliment DK Metcalf. But you know what? If players, and I say this for any player, whatever you need for motivation, use it. If that worked for DK Metcalf, if he thinks he's as good as Calvin Johnson, he's not. But if he thinks he's as good, and that fueled him to get 177 yards, and he was great tonight, Godspeed to him. But, when you're talking about all-time greats, and you say a player isn't so-and-so, whether it's Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, that's not an insult. That's just common sense.
Football 24/7 with John McMullen, special post-game edition. Eagles again lose the football game tonight, 23-17. The road gets a lot harder next week. Johnny Mac, great stuff, man. We'll see you all week across the multiple outlets, and we'll look for you later on today. Well done, Johnny Mac.
All right, thanks, Krause. And next you only got to worry about Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Although I wonder how Aaron Rodgers would do with these 5 receivers. John, what do you think?
He'd do great. And that's one of the criticisms. I know we got to go, but that's one of the criticisms that I have with Carson Wentz. The true greats, like Aaron Rodgers and even Russell Wilson, they elevate everybody. Now, it might not be as great, but you've seen it over the years. Aaron's been around for a long time. He's got bad receivers now. You wouldn't know it, except for Devontae Adams. You wouldn't know it because he makes them all look good.
Johnny Mac, football 24/7 with John McMullen. Okay, Johnny Mac, thank you, brother.